Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Transrational Perspectives. I'm Noah Taylor, coming to you from the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
I'm Shawn Bryant from Canada, and right now I'm in Taipei, Taiwan.
And in this episode, we're coming to the end of our first arc, where we've been looking at the different peace families. We started off with our energetic peace family, where we looked at peace as derived from harmony. We've looked at the moral peace family, which brings to understandings of peace related to justice. We've explored the moral peace family based on security. And our last episode was on the postmodern peace families, which explores peace as being based on truth or truths. Which brings us to our topic today of the transrational perspective of peace, or the transrational peace family. So first of all, we have to start with what is transrational pieces. So Shawn, can you give us an introduction to how we can get a perspective on what transrational pieces are?
Sure. Just starting with the word, the transrational, it sounds like a big word, maybe scary word, of like, what does this really mean? We break it down into two parts. Rational, you might have some idea what that means of thinking of things in logical and objective ways. And trans is the prefix meaning beyond. So that means we are rational beings, but we are also so much more than just rational beings. When we decide what clothes to wear in the morning, these are not only rational choices. Do not like just check the temperature and then make a decision about what clothes to wear. It is an emotional decision that we make. So not only are we rational beings, but we are also emotional beings, spiritual beings, sexual beings, meaning that it is an approach that takes into account all of these aspects of the human condition. One way of saying it is that we are rational plus, right? So that we in the idea of being transrational is that we have gone through this process of rationality, and we have other things that contribute to who we are.
Thank you, Shawn, for that introduction. So, Shawn, perhaps you could give us an example of what this transrational perspective would look like in a very grounded topic, for example, in the research that you've done on economics.
One of the examples I used to explain a transrational approach was charity. So if I break down what charity is through the different families quickly, so an energetic interpretation of charity is it's a gift that's motivated by feelings of empathy or gratitude. Just like I want to give this to you, so I do it. A moral framework might be through because of a religious necessity. So like tithing or zakat, of giving part of your income to the church or mosque or the religion that is can be interpreted in a moral way. In under a modern framework, something like state taxes that is redistributed as a part of the welfare state can be seen as an example of charity. And in a postmodern perspective on charity is as well, you're just buying the feeling of feeling less guilty towards like the poor people. So saying this, you're not actually doing anything that all you're really doing is just trying to get away from your own guilt. So then if we put them together and say, let's look at this through a transrational lens, well, what is a transrational approach to charity? Well, I then see that as one that takes the best of all of these four perspectives. So that is then ideally, an ideal form of charity is one that is still motivated by feelings of empathy rather than being imposed or coerced or forced. Following the moral paradigm, then it is still something that follows established traditions. So something that is traditional, maybe through a religion or for an organization that's been around for a long time, say like Oxfam or Save the Children, that it still has this modern element of rational efficiency, being an efficient redistribution of resources. You don't want to feel that your donation is being squandered. And the postmodern aspect of saying that it should also leave the donor with genuine feelings of satisfaction. That example illustrates how you can take some concept and through each of the four families of pieces, try to emphasize the good parts of them and mitigate the shadow aspects, each family.
If we then want to move into how do we understand what it means to work with this piece perspective, I think it can be helpful to conceptualize the transrational piece family not as an independent family of pieces like the previous four, but rather as a specific modality or a way of operating within and amongst the four other piece families. And building on what you said about what the transrational is, if we treat rationality as a particular mode of consciousness, similar to being able to be aware that we are thinking, means that we are not only identified with our thoughts. When we're aware of our own rational capacity, it means that we're more than that rational capacity itself. So I think of it in that similar turn or that similar twist when we think about how do we work with this perspective of the transrational piece family. And I like to think of it as a metaphor of a boat. So if we imagine a river, and this river is the sea of the episode of a particular conflict, and we imagine a boat floating on top of it, and our boat is divided into four parts, four triangles, that has the energetic, the moral, the modern, and the postmodern. In any specific situation, when we're looking at it, we can ask ourselves what particular themes are being manifest in that concrete episode, and then we can, through looking at where the attention is placed, see where the imbalances are starting to occur. For example, in situations where there is an ongoing violent conflict and an active military response to try to quell that, you can see the emphasis is very much on this peace through security perspective. And what tends to happen as you emphasize the security approach is that you decrease the harmony perspective on peace. And so as you think of traditional security measures, whether it's military or law enforcement, it involves a locking down and a freezing of conflict, and it tends to inhibit the relational capacity of humans. And we can see that in a transrational approach, we're not just identifying with, there's a lack of harmony or there is a security approach. We're seeing that the increased emphasis on the approach of security is having an inverse effect on the relational harmony in the conflict episode.
Exactly. I think that's really, really well put. I like to think of a transrational approach as being a kind of synthesis of the other four families. Just like you said about the metaphor of the boat. So which side of the boat is higher or lower? Is that if I am thinking about wanting to do something, if I'm trying to create peace in the world, and then I need to be thinking about how my actions then will impact all four of those different families. How will they impact truth and security and harmony and justice?
Yeah, I think that's a really good explanation, because we can think of in a specific instance, for example, if you're involved in facilitating the dialogue process or mediation process, you come in with your specific role as a facilitator, for example. And maybe what your explicit goal is to get the two parties to come to a set of working agreements. And that's a very pragmatic goal, but it involves the utilization of much of your relational capacity, because you're with real people who are really there with you in the room. And what you are doing then is you're also relating and communicating at the human level while still all maintaining your specific set of roles in that particular episode. And I think that part of what operating with the transrational perspective means is to figure out how to acknowledge and to balance those relational aspects with the pragmatic aspects of the task that you are trying to achieve.
Right. And I was thinking of trying to make it very concrete. Like, what are examples of transrational approach to peace, or to kind of making peace or peace building? And I thought of the example was similar to what you just said, of a divorce mediation. And we can have these rational and objective parts of the process. I mean, that is, there are positions. I mean, that is what each party what they're demanding. I say, well, I want this, and the other say, well, no, I want that, or say custody of children or something. And then their interests, and like, well, what is the story behind that they really want that creates that position? It's like, well, they want to make sure their children are safe. That could be maybe an interest, or they want to spend time with their children. So So, but then behind those layers, which are the most rational parts, there can be a lot of hurt feelings, and so the idea is that if you need to take into account all of these other psychosocial, emotional, spiritual dimensions, that in order to come to some agreement, to have some resolution to this conflict, that there is a lot of sort of healing work that needs to happen behind the scenes before someone is maybe ready to compromise. And I think this is a similar thing that is often obscured in very large peace processes. We might see like the peace treaty or some agreement between warring parties. But in order to have these people actually sit down in the same room, the same table, and sign a document, there had to be a lot of other behind-the-scenes work done to establish some kind of trust, so that they can even be in the same room and trust that they won't be killed or swindled or cheated. And a lot of those things that need to happen are very soft skills that are working on these relational levels that the transrational approach understands is important and puts equal weight on those aspects.
I think so. Shawn, perhaps you could give us an example of what this transrational perspective would look like in a very grounded topic, for example, in the research that you've done on economics.
One of the examples I used to explain a transrational approach was charity. So if I break down what charity is through the different families quickly, so an energetic interpretation of charity is a gift that's motivated by feelings of empathy or gratitude, just like I want to give this to you, so I do it. A moral framework might be through because of a religious necessity, so like tithing or zakat, of giving part of your income to the church or mosque or the religion. that is how it can be interpreted in a moral way. Under a modern framework, something like state taxes that is redistributed as a part of the welfare state can be seen as an example of charity. And in a postmodern perspective on charity is as well, you're just buying the feeling of feeling less guilty towards like the poor people. So saying this, you're not actually doing anything, that all you're really doing is just trying to get away from your own guilt. So then, if we put them together and say, let's look at this through a transrational lens. Well, what is a transrational approach to charity? Well, I then see that as one that takes the best of all of these four perspectives. So that is then ideally an ideal form of charity is one that is still motivated by feelings of empathy, rather than being imposed or coerced or forced. Following the moral paradigm, then it is still something that follows established traditions. So something that is traditional, maybe through a religion or for an organization that's been around for a long time, say like Oxfam or Save the Children. That it still has this modern element of rational efficiency, being an efficient redistribution of resources. You don't want to feel that your donation is being squandered, and the postmodern aspect of saying that it should also leave the donor with genuine feelings of satisfaction. And so I think that example illustrates how you can take some concept and through each of the four families of pieces try to emphasize the the good parts of them and mitigate the shadow aspects of each family.
A good illustration of this point that you brought up, if we look at the current peace process in Myanmar, where the government has moved between negotiating individual ceasefires with specific armed groups and is now moving towards a comprehensive ceasefire agreement. What is kind of the backstory or the unseen story of that process is that for 12 years before the formal call for the individual ceasefire agreements came out, it was the Minister of Railways that instigated this process. And he was very self-aware of his own positionality, that being the Minister of Railways gives you the ability to access remote areas. It makes sense within the context of your job in order to go there. And he had to already build connections with these armed groups in order to facilitate the building and the maintenance of railways through the territories that they controlled. So he realized that he was in an ideal position to build the relational framework for the later institutional peace process. And so this peace process couldn't have started if it wasn't for this 12 years of the efforts of this minister going and meeting these individual groups and building this personal trust with them, especially in the context of a prolonged 45-year-long civil war where distrust between the different ethnic groups and the government had really risen to a very high level. When we're thinking about how do we work from a transrational approach to peace studies, it can be helpful to remember three guiding principles or three pillars upon which implementing this perspective can be thought to rest on. And the first of this is homeostasis, the second is correspondence, and the third is resonance. You want to give us an idea of what this first principle, homeostasis, means in this context?
I'll sort of run through all three. Is that homeostasis is the principle that any given system, any given constellation will maintain itself, and so that is through the feedback loops that already exist in the system, that it will keep the status quo until it is stressed or disrupted to the point of collapse. And what happens after collapse, it remains to be seen. The second one, or the next one we'll come to, is correspondence. It is the principle that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. That is, the same conflicts that we will see on a personal level, or even internally, an intrapersonal level, are fundamentally the same conflicts that we'll see at a communal level, a social level, societal level, or national level, or international level. They are self-similar across the levels of scale. Resonance is the principle that one party or one body has an effect on those around it. So, say, for example, someone comes into a room feeling sad, other people notice or pick up on that. Here's my summary. Homeostasis is like this. There's those feedback loops that are holding everything in place. Correspondence is like this, up and down, means the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. And resonance is like this, meaning that I affect my reality outside of me, I affect the world around me, I affect the people around me, and vice versa, the people around me will have an impact and affect me.
And if we think of how these kinds of guiding principles could inform us in a specific situation, if we first look at homeostasis, we can ask ourselves questions about, given the current relational dynamics of the episode of the conflict in which I'm working, which elements are causing the system to stay the way it is, and which elements or which relational patterns, once changed, could lead to a dramatically different situation. If we think about the key principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without, we can look how the microcosm reflects to the macrocosm. And another way of looking at it through the lens of theme-centered interaction is what elements inside the globe are affecting the specific episode upon which we're working. You could think of an example of a conflict between two students in a primary school. While it's possible that the conflict is entirely contained within the context of the school, it's highly likely that there are larger conflicts either within the home family or within the community that are being expressed in the context of the classroom. So if we consider our guiding principle of resonance, we can think of the one of the adages in facilitation is that the quality of presence that you bring into the room is one of your most powerful tools as a peace worker, as a facilitator. The quality of presence in which you show up for will resonate with the other people in the room and will help to determine whether or not it feels like a safe space, a space where people feel listened to and accepted and able to express themselves, or if they see it as a hostile environment. And this is in the set of subtle contact skills, because this involves a lot of the work that you might do in preparation for the specific mediation event, or even your personal work as peace worker. Because part of what it means, at least to me, of being a peace worker in this transrational frame is that while you should be very well informed in the context that you work, and you should also have a sufficient background in the theory and practical literature in the field of conflict transformation, it also entails doing the personal work or contemplative practices or whatever capacities that you need to work on to be able to tap into different qualities of presence and work precisely through this frame of resonances.
Such a good example that you brought up. And a personal note, one of the jobs I had recently is I was working for 30 days in a closed setting with a number of students, about 200 students, I think. And exactly what you're talking about was one of my focuses of my actions. So I'd always make sure that I went to bed at a really good time. I was always in bed by about 10 p.m. I woke up really early. I would make time to make sure I did exercise. I'd go jogging or do some yoga asanas in the morning. Also my diet, I would try to eat healthy food and not very much. And all of this was preparing myself, and with the conscious effort to say, well, I want to be at my best so that I can be I can be as present as possible for these students, right? So just like you said, so that I have my full capacity of attention to pay attention to them, to listen to them, to not be distracted. So to be at my best when I have to impart knowledge, also to be relaxed, to have all of my physical and bodily needs taken care of. And I think this is a practice this is like the base practice of how to practice transrational pieces.
And I think that if we look at the four pieces as the energetic being peace from harmony, the moral being peace through justice, the modern being peace through security, and the postmodern being peace through truth, the way that I would put the transrational frame in a similar sentence construction is peace through a balanced embrace. And what I mean by that is looking at precisely how all of these different elements work together in a specific situation. It involves the relationship of the individual into the context of the constellation of the other, but it also involves going beyond the layers of the personas that show up. And this means exactly what you're saying. How do I tap into the resonance potential of all of those different layers that make up my persona? And I think that when we say a transrational approach is trying to look at the homeostatic balance between multiple elements, of course it's looking at the homeostatic balance between these four peace families. It's also looking at trying to work through homeostatic interpersonal layers and the resultant intrapersonal layers. So thank you everyone for joining this episode of Transrational Perspectives, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you, and bye-bye.